Hi guys, I did it. I read The Hunger Games. You all guessed it right. Now, some of you might know that I was hesitant to read this just because I've been aware of this book, or the series of books, for a long time. Like, I've known about it, and I knew that Stephenie Meyer was promoting it, saying it was a great book, and I knew that a lot of Twilight fans had ventured into the games of hunger. So, I knew about it, and I definitely knew about it, but I was really hesitant to read it because, I don't know, every Twilight fan was like, oh my god, The Hunger Games, and I was just like, I don't want to, I don't know, I just didn't want to follow the same herd again, you know what I mean? So, I didn't read it, and then, you know, the movie's coming out in like a few weeks or a week or two, and I don't know, everyone was like, read it, read The Hunger Games, and you know what, I was just like, I like reading, I want to read a good book. I'm an idiot if I don't read this because I'm just cheating myself out of a good book. So I finally read it. Now I have a lot of different opinions about this book, but just I want to say overall I really enjoyed it, and it was definitely a page turner. I do plan on reading the second and the third books. I think there's 3 of them, and I absolutely think that it's worth reading. It was entertaining, and yeah, I couldn't put it down. I read this very fast, so. And I can't wait to see the movie. So I really liked it. I enjoyed it. However, I didn't love it as much as I thought that I would. And I heard so much hype about these books and the movies. So I was expecting something really, really great. And I was underwhelmed. Some things that I agree with, Stephen King, I agree with his review of this book completely. He said, it's addictive, and it's a shoot-it-if-it-moves video game. Yeah, that's true. He said that there were displays of authorial laziness that kids will accept more readily than adults, and the love triangle was standard for the genre. I absolutely agree with that. When I was reading this book, I was actually very surprised at all the things that I had, you know, noticed that were lacking in terms of the actual writing. Another thing that I just found when I was looking on the internet was somebody wrote, there's a series of fragmented sentences in a transparent and ineffective attempt to be profound. Now, whether that's an attempt to be profound, I don't know. That could be true. But the fragments in this book, now, don't get me wrong, I love a fragment. I love me a sentence fragment. My favorite style to read is a conversational style where there are fragments and it's not written like an essay. However, I have never seen or I've never read a book with a sentence fragment every other word. It was choppy, and it did break everything up, and it did make me sort of go, well, it's all very abrupt. I wrote down the number of a page that had a particularly bad sentence fragment, and now I think that the difference between occasional sentence fragments to sort of get you in the mind of the character, I think those are fine and necessary and help. But for instance, I'm on page 148 in The Hunger Games, if anyone wants to follow along. It says, certainly it could be of some use in a downpour, period. But there in the mouth, comma, I can see a tent pack that would protect from almost any sort of weather, period. If I had the guts to go in and fight for it against the other 23 tributes, period, which I have been instructed not to do, period. So this is how it just reads like, if I had the guts to go in and fight for it against the other 23 tributes, which I have been instructed not to do. Like, it just sort of, there should be a comma after tributes, and that happens a lot. If I had the guts to go in and fight for it against the other 23 tributes, which I had been instructed not to do. See the difference? Does that make sense? Anyway, yeah, there were just way too many fragments in here for it to be, for it to flow better. So yeah, I would say that this is really lacking in the writing department, which is, whatever. Not every book can be, perfect. But I did notice that this really did have some flaws, major flaws with the writing. And also just Suzanne Collins, I don't really understand, because her writing, for me, was not great. I really didn't care much for the characters. The only characters that I cared about were Peeta and Gale. For some reason, when I was reading this, and believe me, I am a crybaby. I can attach myself to a character and really, feel bad for them. When I read Harry Potter, I was like wailing. Spoiler alert for anyone who did not read this or doesn't want to know what happens, you can turn the video off here. In the book, there's a character, Rue, who is supposed to be essentially prim equivalent, 12-year-old small girl. And I knew that something was going to happen eventually. So when it did happen, when Rue did die, I felt nothing. Like, I really didn't feel anything because, I don't know. I don't know why. That doesn't usually happen with me. I usually always, like, I can cry at anything. And for some reason, the way that this was written, I felt absolutely detached from Rue, from Katniss, from, like, all the characters, essentially, except for Peeta and Gale. So I thought that was lacking. It seemed very forced. Like, another thing is that everything in this book, I felt like she was sort of saying, this is what's happening, you have to feel this way, this is how I want you to feel, this is what's going on, you know? Like, instead of letting you feel it yourself, she sort of didn't give you a choice. And another example of that is when there's a part in this book where, spoiler alert again, Katniss loses her hearing in her left ear. And I didn't write the page down, but I think it said something like, it was like, I realized I lost the hearing in my left ear. This thought terrified me. Like, of course it does. Like, she's telling us that we have to be terrified. It's like, I get it. I don't know. I don't really like when authors sort of push emotion, like, this is how you have to feel. Because that doesn't really, it makes me think that they don't have any sort of faith in the reader to be smart enough to grasp all the situations. And that did happen a lot. Throughout the whole thing, she's constantly trying to make the situation seem one way, but they don't come across that way. Like, I never once was worried about these Hunger Games. Like, the one time I ever really felt worried or anything like that about the Hunger Games themselves was in the very beginning of the book when she was explaining it. And then I was like, wow, this is serious, you know, I was thinking, this is awful, you know? And as she got into the Hunger Games, I was not worried at all. I was like, oh, this is a piece of cake, everything's working out for her. You know what I mean? Like, I never once felt like she was in jeopardy. I never once felt like Peeta was in jeopardy. I really didn't. I really didn't. I knew that she was gonna, you know, I knew that it was gonna work out for her because it did work out for her. So essentially the Hunger Games they lost their, I don't know, their scary factor, I guess, because really everything worked out for her when she was in there. Also, the fact that she had to, like, keep trying to, like, kiss him to get stuff, like, stuff from sponsors, I thought that was kind of weird. Like, I don't know, it was very weird. It's almost something like that a little kid would come up with, like, I don't know why. Like, if a little kid was talking about a story, they'd be like, oh, you have to keep kissing him, and then we're gonna give you gifts. You know what I mean? It's just sort of, it was an odd thing. But whatever, it's her choice, and I just have to accept that, because that's what happens in the story, but I just thought it was a little odd. Another thing that sort of goes back to her not really having faith in the reader to sort of grasp things, is that throughout the whole book, she just constantly is shoving questions that we should be asking ourselves in our face. Like, Katniss will be talking to Peeta, and, you know, she'll be confused, and Peeta will seem one way, and then she goes into, like, a list of questions. Is Peeta really being genuine? Is he just playing this for the games? Is he just putting on an act? Or does he really like me? Like, she puts in those questions because I assume that she doesn't think the reader's smart enough. She goes, well, the reader's probably not going to be smart enough to think of these herself or himself, so I have to put these questions in there. It's almost like a children's book where, you know, they ask a lot of questions like, you know, is this a bad thing? What could happen here? Fill in your answer, you know what I mean? So that was a little too much. I also thought everything in this book was extremely predictable. For example, in the very beginning when she scores the 11, because she shoots the arrow at the sponsors, you know, before she knows that she scored an 11, she sort of leaves that room and she goes like, what have I done? What have I done? This is going to be awful. You know, every Effie and Cinna and Peeta are like, oh no, you've just ruined all your chances. I'm sure you won't die right away. You know what I mean? Like, they're building this up to be such a horrible thing, and I'm thinking, well, she's obviously going to score really high. Obviously. I can't believe that any reader would be reading that and sort of being tricked into thinking that this really was a bad moment for her. Because immediately, right when she, you know, shot the arrow towards them, I thought, well, they're going to love this, you know? Like, it's an out-of-the-box thing. They're going to score her very high. So when they said, when 11 flashed on the screen, I was thinking, are we supposed to be surprised? Because that's an obvious thing that would happen. So yeah, there were just a lot of, essentially everything in this book was predictable. But that's not, necessarily a bad thing. Like I said, I did enjoy this book, and I'm going to read the rest of them, but I don't know. These books were not challenging in any way. And also, again, like I said before, the Hunger Games themselves, there was no threat. Like, I never felt like, wow, these are really crazy, because she was never really in any danger, you know what I mean? Like yeah, she was chased by fire and stuff, but everything worked out for her so well. In the beginning of the book, it makes it seem like if she's chosen for this, she's not gonna, live past 5 minutes into the Hunger Games, because they make it seem like, oh yeah, the careers, they train their whole life for this. And all of a sudden, when Katniss, someone from the poorest district gets chosen or volunteers herself, she doesn't, she does incredibly well, and it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal. If I were Katniss, or if I were the author, I would put in her thoughts, the fear of at any moment she's going to be killed, and the expectation that she's going to be killed. Because it didn't seem threatening at all. She made it the whole way without really any, any real big deals. Yeah, some bad stuff happened in the Hunger Games, with the fire and all of that, but that's standard. She knew that was going to happen, so, I don't know. The Hunger Games seemed very easy to win. And also, the people weren't very threatening in the Hunger Games, the other tributes. Especially the one, I forgot his name, but the one that spares her life towards the end because she was, friendly with Rue. It was just oh, what a coincidence, he has a heart. You know what I mean? I don't know, I just thought it was very unrealistic. But it was, it helped the story. Also, this happens twice towards the end of the book, but there's 2 parts where Katniss starts to think, wow, for the first time I thought, wow, maybe I can win this thing. And I'm thinking, but you shouldn't, it never crossed Katniss's mind that she's not gonna win. I don't know, I didn't really get it. I felt very comfortable reading Katniss's story. I knew that she was gonna be fine, it was gonna be a breeze, she and Peeta were gonna, and that's another thing, when the announcer was there were gonna be 2 winners, and I was okay, of course there are gonna be, because Peeta has to live, so does Katniss, and it would be weird if one of them died. And then when it's the 2 of them left, they're JK, one of you's gonna win, LOL, bye. And I was okay, well that's not gonna work. And I thought that it was gonna get really interesting and that she was just gonna kill Peeta, but, which would have been sad, but interesting. And then they were just here, take these berries and we'll pretend that we're gonna kill it ourselves. And then it was just so anticlimactic. They're wait, don't do it, don't eat the berries, it's over, you both win. It was just so, whatever. So I do like this book a lot. The Hunger Games book, very entertaining. I'm going to see the movie, cannot wait. And I'll review the movie as well. And I'm glad I read it. I think it's a worthwhile read and an interesting book. And that's it. So comment below what you thought of it, and thank you for watching.